This is the session. It is a migration strategy. It's a particular strategy I embrace, which is going to be different than what you may be expecting or what you have heard other sessions about on migrating. And I really believe in this and have wrapped a whole session around it because I think it's a good strategy. It does use some PowerShell, but it's not a bulk push strategy. It's more of a combination of technology and business processes. Because in these sessions I do, you've seen this one. I don't really need to hammer you again for the 17th time with that. You've been to PASS. Who participates in their local user group? Well, the rest of you are missing out. You really should. They're great monthly events. Michelle and I organize the local SQL Saturday. She hosts our user group at her place of work, and we have a great time every month, every year between those two events. We're in Orange County, California, is where we are. Please do the evaluations, the session evaluations, all of the speakers. We do this. We're passionate about teaching and what we do. We take great pride in it, and we need to know what works, what doesn't work. So the good, the bad, the ugly, it's all data, and we will put it to use if we get it. So we only know what we can improve upon if we hear about it. If you want to kudos and straight line the fives, I'm fine with that too. There's me. I mentioned user group leader, SQL Saturday organizer. If you don't go to your nearest SQL Saturday event, make a point of it. A great full day of getting your learn on in your community. I also teach fishing and archery at a local Boy Scout camp on weekends, and am a true bluesaholic. I cannot get enough of the blues, and try and catch live music at least once a month is my personal objective. This is a session that I've put together specifically for Summit. I put it together several years ago when 2016 came out, and SSRS finally got some love after a decade plus of neglect. The redheaded stepchild got some love. I learned just yesterday and today that 2019 we didn't really get any more love, particularly one bug that's still really bad. Did not get addressed. But this is a subsession from a full day class that I teach that has a few more chapters, and we go into these chapters quite a bit deeper. So I am going to go fast. When I'm not presenting, I'm attending, and I like it fast. I like the fire hose approach. I like to go back to my desk and regurgitate as much as I can on what I got. So I'm going to go fast, and I think I need to, at this point in the conference, post. There is coffee. I got some. If you're dragging to get through the conference. But that said, if you have questions, stop me and ask me. This is meant to be interactive. You don't need to come and listen to me talk. If you have questions, comments, feedback, throw it out there. If I think it's coming up in a future portion of the presentation, I'll punt and say it's coming. If I lied and I didn't get to it, call me out on it. Get your question answered, either here during the session or afterwards. You can even go to dinner and talk about it in deep detail if you really want to. So I'm going to try and cover all of these aspects. Some of them are probably, as many times as I've done these presentations, are features that are not used when I poll the audience, and I'll do some of that along the way. And they're really good features and functionalities that you should explore if you're not. That said, so back to the comment here, this is a migration strategy, but it's really intended to go from one SSRS implementation to another, whether you're going from 8, R2, 12, 14, up a version or 2, or all the way to 17 or 19, should you be lucky. It would also apply for a migration to the cloud if you were fortunate enough to have premium and you could do paginated reports alongside, or if you had a report server on-prem where you had Power BI alongside your paginated reports. And I'm not going to go into that a lot. That's a whole session in itself. And most of this migration strategy is less about the technology involved. I'll cover that with some PowerShell. It's more about the business process to be successful in a good migration and to take advantage of the opportunity you have to go to a new server. So questions or concerns? All right, let's go. I'm going to try to go fast. So I presented a lot of SQL Saturdays. I'm honored to be here at Summit this year. And there are few to no SSRS sessions generally on the calendars. Anyone disagree? Anyone been to a SQL Saturday and not seen one? Well, I didn't. So I really believe in the tool. I have used it since it came out in 2004. I actually spent a long time not using it at all, and I mentored someone who worked for me, she got to write most of them. But it is not going anywhere. I was in an earlier session today, and Chris Finland, or this week, said, the rude questions, is it dead? It's not dead. It's not going to go anywhere. The paginated report, I want it printed on the page looking nice, business requirement will not go away. Yes, Power BI is the sexy big sister analytics platform, but to get it on the page, and particularly our executive sponsors are regularly CFOs, they want it printed, and they want it to look nice on the page, and this is the tool for that. So where I'm going with that is, in this session, rather than spend a whole bunch of time on a deep dive on a migration strategy, I also include a little survey of some stuff that I've done over the past decade plus in SSRS for some ideas that you might move as you go on a migration to a new server and level up your SSRS implementation. So we'll talk about a few reporting examples. This is an SSRS report. This gauge here is actually an SSRS report embedded in a web page. It happens to be a SharePoint web page, but it could be any web page. And it is an interactive dashboard report in that if you click on it, it changes. It defaults to yesterday's sales. You click it again, it defaults to week to date. Last 4 weeks, period to date, or a trailing 13. I don't remember exactly, year to date. But it's completely interactive, and it is that fast because it's cached. So I'll be talking more about caching your data sets on that, but that's an example. It does not have to be a SharePoint website. It could be any website. You can embed an SSRS report. The wall of numbers. I had a COO one time tell me, Ted, that report doesn't help. It's a wall of numbers. I said, I know. I tried to not create that report, but you insisted that you wanted sales by hour broken up into the 3 shifts of the 24-hour day with all of these KPIs for all of the days of the week. And this is only page 1 of 2. I said, you're right, but you insisted. Tell me if this 3 is a good number or a bad number, and I will highlight the ones that should be of concern, or I'll just change it and do exception-based reporting and not show any numbers that are okay and only put numbers on the page that matter. I said, just give me the thresholds. I don't know if 7 is good or bad. I don't know if it's supposed to be 7 or supposed to be 2. Tell me and I'll fix it. What do you think? Did they tell me? No. To this day, the report probably still looks just like this. I tried to introduce some visuals. This is a very old report. You might recognize, I've stripped out in my screenshot the header, but this goes all the way back to 2008, I think even pre-R2. And I tried to introduce some visuals to do a better job of displaying the data and trying to tell the story. And the financial team said, no, I want the grid. This is the exact same data as this. It's 3 KPIs, 1, 2, 3, over the 13 periods of the year. It's a trailing 13. In much of retail, don't use a traditional Gregorian calendar. It's a fiscal calendar. So I said, all right, I'm not going to get rid of the visuals because you're not the only user of this report. And there are people who don't want the grid. So we compromised, and the 1-page report turned into a 2-page because I simply added the graph. This is a dashboard I built in SSRS 10 years ago. It is a dashboard, and I call it a dashboard in that it is completely interactive, and there is no pick parameters, run report. When the user clicks on the link you saw back on SharePoint, when they click on it, it renders this immediately. And if they want to change to the previous week, they can hit previous week. This shows the days of the week. If they hit week, it'll show the weeks of the period. Completely interactive in that the user doesn't have to do anything. I would not even attempt this today unless Power BI was absolutely, completely, no way, no how in the cards. Because this took me months to produce. I could do it in a week in Power BI. And that would be the tool. But not everyone gets to have Power BI or go there. And it's an example of what you can do with reporting services if you wanted to. It's very interactive. We don't have time today, but if you click on Region 1, it will expand out Region 1 and show the 10 areas in Region 1. And the user just clicks, click, click. Number 1 most used report, heads above any other report in the company. It was very popular. I am sure still is today because that company said, we're not doing Power BI. And I consequently left. This is a combination of an interactive report in that we get the wall of numbers, but it's also interactive in that if they want to look at a different time frame, an improved user experience. I never cared for the start date, end date with the calendar picker. I pretty much exclusively do not use the calendar control picker because I don't like the user interface. Pick, start date, end date, view report. I have drop downs, if anything, but here they don't even need a drop down. They just click on it. It technically, under the hood, drills through to itself with some new parameters all hooked into itself. And so it did make the report a little more complex, but a much improved user interface, user experience. This is a mobile report. I have a customer that wanted their sales every day on their phone. They wanted to roll over in bed and see how we did. It's for the owner of a small business that had 5 locations. Well, they have 5 now. They had 4 here. And they didn't want to get it in an email where they had to click on an attachment and view the attachment. Because we've all done subscriptions and emailed out, usually as an Excel spreadsheet, reports. So I did this, and it's optimized and a beautiful fit on a 4-inch screen. So they could roll over, click it, and they wouldn't have to open it. They could just see it right there. And they can scroll down, actually, and it gives the detail on that. Again, if you have Enterprise Edition, then you have mobile reports, and I would have written this in Mobile Report Builder for the customer, but Enterprise Edition is not in the cards for them. Questions about some of those examples? I'm going to keep pinging you to make sure you're awake. I know it's late on Friday. Mobile report. So if you have Enterprise Edition, who believes they have Enterprise Edition? That is more than I usually see, because that's close to half of you. With Enterprise Edition, you get a few features the rest of us don't, including mobile reports, KPIs, and data-driven subscriptions. If you have Enterprise Edition and Software Assurance, you can do Report Publisher on-prem and do some Power BI alongside it. You have some limitations on Power BI. You don't get the full features. Things like bookmarks aren't available on the on-prem edition. So if you don't have, you will not see Mobile Report and KPI in this drop-down list if you were to go back. Anyone still using 14 or 12 or lower? Okay, so this may look different to you because this is the 2016 report portal instead of the old report manager. It got a new modern, that's the little bit of love we got. We got a new modern look and feel to report portal as part of the upgrades that came with 2016. If you click on it, Microsoft did a great job with this. If you click on it, it will either open the app on your workstation, or it will take you straight to the website, and you don't have to go hunt around. You know how fun it is to go hunt Microsoft's site to find a download. It's really nice. They take you right to the latest one. Really nice feature there. It downloads a little app. I will cover a little bit of this, probably a little more than I normally do because there's enough of you in here. Those of you who said you had enterprise, are anyone using mobile reports? See, that always amazes me. Enterprise edition for other reasons, but not taking advantage of mobile reports. It is really neat. Microsoft bought a company, DataZen, many years ago. They took a few years and folded this excellent mobile report company's tools, and that's what we got with 2016. By 2016, it was integrated and it was this. So I will spend a little time on this since some of you have it, and you should know what's available and what you already own. Licensing, no additional costs from a licensing standpoint, and it's silly, wicked easy to bang out some mobile reports. Again, these are reports optimized for a 4-inch screen or a tablet in either portrait or landscape mode. You get to pick the palette. Just like on paginated reports, we get to pick landscape or not. So you get this palette. The download is super fast. The install is even faster. It's a very, very lightweight application. It's designed for the power user, for a non-technical, it's not the intimidating interface of Visual Studio or SSMS, SSDT. It's designed for a power user. You get these visuals, you pick a layout, you drag them on, you get all of these visuals. It's just visuals. You would not really be putting a grid on a 4-inch screen. Not a good design practice. It's available if you had to, but generally it's just these visuals. You drag them onto the page, you stretch and size them the way you want. It is reactive, so that if you design it for a 4-inch screen or you design it for a tablet and someone with a 4-inch screen goes and runs it, it will see the screen and do a reasonable job of going, I'm going to rearrange these visuals to fit this screen. Stuff that we used to have to do hard code before. You connect it up to a data set. I wrote a tiny little data set to put some data on the page. You can set all kinds of settings and targets. So if you want this to be red or green, it's a target against either a fixed value or it can be a dynamic value for you to decide. And then when you're done in the tool, in the designer builder tool, you have two choices here. Clearly, one of them is to the server, so then I can go view it in a browser on a device of my choice. What do you think this other one's good for? Quiz time. Bueller? No, it's not neither one's what I was thinking. Well, publish will send it to the report portal, yes. Source control. You should be putting your RDLs, your hard effort, into source control and version controlling of your choice. Hopefully you're doing it with your T-SQL. You should be doing it with your RDLs, your PBIX files. It's lots of work. I know you've probably all done this because I have more than twice. Susie comes up and says, hey, add this column to this report and change this other one. And you do, and then 2 weeks later, someone comes barging in going, oh my God, what did you do to the report? You wrecked it. Yes?
Are you doing all your report development in Visual Studio? Or
Yes.
Do you hook that up to Azure DevOps now? Or?
I have not. I stick to Visual Studio or SSDT for the reports that I develop. There's also Report Builder, which is a single report at a time. It's equally as capable. It's a less intimidating interface for creating the reports. It's much more like this tool.
Right, but you've not wired Report Builder up to Azure DevOps or TFS or anything like that?
No.
Okay, got it.
It doesn't have the same hook-ins that the Redgate tools will do for SSMS. It doesn't have that same thing. So that's why there's this option where you would save it off somewhere, and then outside of that, you would need to go and do your check-in, check-out process. All right, then when you publish it, it shows up and it looks like this. It's actually pretty neat. One of the number one complaints I've gotten in the past is there are too many reports, I can't find the report I want. Anyone else get that? Really? We had 150, which wasn't that many, and I had them really well organized. And I go, come on, users. So this is kind of neat, is you can kind of go, oh, I want the one with the funnel chart. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. All right, KPIs. So here's what KPIs look like if you're using them. Super easy, simple little key performance indicator so that if your user comes to the portal, go, oh, I don't even need to go run the daily sales report. I can see we're okay. Really good for the executive level. The higher up the C-stack you go, great tool there. There's some questionable use beyond that, but usually they're not interested in the nuts and bolts. The area manager wants to see how his 10 locations that he supervises handled it. But really, you start getting further up the management chain, they just want this. A KPI is really easy to create. I did a zoom in. So you go and create one, you hook it up to a data source, you give it a name, you format it, you can set the value on what you want it to be, and it can either be set manually or you can set it to a data field in a data set. So maybe you have a query that goes and looks at budget or forecasted sales, and you want to know, did we meet or exceed forecast or budget, whatever's appropriate. Really easy little hookup, again, designed for the power user rather than the developer to be able to do something with the data sets that the data engineer, the data modeler, has created and published. I, again, created just a simple little data set in order to show it. Goal, you can just leave it blank, and we just covered that. Questions there? I asked about anyone using mobile reports. Anyone using KPIs? Enterprise folks? Yeah? They're popular? Okay. Gets them their questions. Because upper management tends to not go look at a detailed report anyways. They pick up the phone and they ask an underling, what happened? Come tell me a story. But we're getting better with that. Okay, migration. So you get particularly those of you who aren't on 16, you get a nice new 16 server. We get to take advantage of some of the new features we have in SSRS with 2016. And you want to go there. And there's several ideas. And I heard some new ones this week, so I'm actually going to wing a few things here on the fly today from some stuff I heard others talk about. And I had some great conversations with a friend who did all kinds of PowerShell to do a migration. And first step would be you need the RDLs. One idea is the one I hear often when I ask is restore backup. I generally really don't like the ideas of restoring a backup for several reasons. And one of the number one reasons are, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, is there are hundreds of reports that are never used. There are dozens and dozens of V1, V2, V3 that I admittedly was trying a couple of changes, and I just did a save as, and published and saw, and then I kept them, and I didn't go back and clean them up. So your restore is just going to bring all that with it. You're also, like we saw earlier when I did a little survey of some report examples, your portal, your collection of reports is probably created by a bunch of different developers at different points in their career of different skill sets and passion and understanding of data presentation, and you have a hodgepodge of different reports that all look like they were exactly what they are, created by different people with different skill sets and different vision at different points in their career. And my idea and strategy I'll talk about here is to take advantage of a chance to clean that up and move to an environment where all of them have a more unified, universal, enterprise-grade solution so that it looks like a quality enterprise, say off the shelf, if you will, solution with some continuity, some similar look and feel, if not identical look and feel, so that it doesn't look like a hodgepodge of reports produced by a bunch of different people over the last decade in different skill sets. So everything you want to know is in the report server database. Everything. When you right-click deploy from Visual Studio, it doesn't upload it to a website. There isn't a website. Report Manager, Report Portal, there is no IIS running on that SQL Server. That got taken out a long time ago because nobody liked that idea. It's using web services. When you right-click deploy, it publishes it to the report server database into a table called catalog, technically into this field called content. It has an image data type because it predates XML, but your RDL is an XML file. You've opened it up, and anyone opened it up in view code? Find, replace? Risky, but it works. It's there. So everything about that RDL you can get by interrogating this database, this table, that field. Everything about what's been happening on your report server is stored in the execution log storage table, and there are multiple views, depending on your version, of that log that make it easier. I have both used the views and rolled my own view on this execution log storage. That's all the activity. It'll tell you everything, every report that's been run, if it succeeded or not, which parameters were used, who did it, time of day, all of that.
From the beginning of time, or is it truncated?
Excellent question. The default setting on this is something silly like 30 or 60 days. Anyone know for sure? It's been so long. 60. Crazy silly. So you're going to want to go in and change the setting. You can go through the UI and go find it and change it and set it to something meaningful. I like 400 days. You want it more than a year. There are reports that are only run once a year. Annual reports. I have a whole story about reviews. And when the boss's reviews were no longer available, which was right before review season, including my own. So you can also query it to see what the setting is. So if you set it to 400, it's going to roll off the 400th day, and it'll retain 399 days. But again, if you set it, it's not going to go back and get that activity. This is a purge setting. Yes?
An issue I've had with SSRS in the past is logging errors. It tells you whether or not a report was successfully executed, but if it failed, it doesn't necessarily tell you why. You have to dig into this text file to find the error message. In newer versions, is that stored anywhere?
No. No. The question was, he's had trouble logging errors. And it does say in this execution log table if it succeeded or failed, but it doesn't give any details of why. And you have to go to the file on the report server, and it only keeps about 10 days, I think, of the files and parse that text file. I have heard of people who have loaded those files into a table and then searched them a little easier than through Notepad. But it has not improved in newer versions that I'm aware of. You can find the used reports by querying that execution log. I have written a single stored procedure that I use, and I pass it a variety of parameters, and it'll return a variety of data. So if I pass it P, it will return all the stored procedures used in all of my RDLs. If I pass it the name of an RDL, it will tell me what data sources are used, what data sets are used, all of that kind of stuff. If I pass it the name of the stored procedure, it'll return all of the RDLs using that stored procedure. So if I'm going to go make a change to a stored procedure, particularly something really dangerous that will definitely break things, like if you change the name of one of the results, one of the fields, you'll break every report that uses it. Adding a column, you're usually safe. So know what you're going to affect when you're going to make a change. So you can interrogate that catalog table, that content table and the content field in the catalog table and get it. I don't know if you can see that in the back, but you can also write a simple group by query against the execution log and get all of the reports and rank them on which ones are used. And remember I said earlier that interactive dashboard report was number 1, 5,000 plus versus just over 4,000. Much, much more popular. Correct. However, I'll bet you could join to the subscription table. It may be it's chopped off in this, but there's a table that stores all the subscription information. And I'll bet you could join to that and go show or exclude or break out with a different group by which ones are subscriptions. Yeah, because we send it to them doesn't mean they read it. Yeah, imagine that. Any other questions or comments there? Okay. As much as you want to find the reports that have been run, and this goes back to my strategy here, is I'm only going to move over the used, the good stuff. I don't want to move over all of these reports and pollute my new server as ugly as my 10-year-old server. Why I don't like the idea of a restore, a database backup restore, is now all of that's there. So as much as you want to find the ones you're going to move over, find the ones that have never been run. For whatever reason, there might be a gem of a report that you see. This is simply look through here that's not in the catalog. That report that's never been run could be a gem that's been forgotten about that could really help the business because you wrote it at some point. Someone wrote it to help the business. It may be a one-off and that problem doesn't exist anymore. It may also be one that just got forgotten about. So whether you're going to move those over or not, at least be aware of the ones that have never been run, as well as a ranking of the ones that have been run. So you go find all the ones that have been run, and you're going to move them over. Ideally, you've been storing all of these in source control, like you all have been, right? All your RDLs are in source control? Come on, people, help me out here. Yes. If they're not today, they will be by the end of the year, okay? 7 weeks. Ideally, you'd go to source control and get them out of source control and then start a new project or a solution with projects, and I'll get into some more of that later. I was somewhere where we didn't have source control for RDLs, and I found this person's blog who had some PowerShell that all I did was take their PowerShell, I pointed it to a report server, and it wanted to know the path where I wanted to dump the reports. So I created a folder called Report Server Download, and I gave it a date because I did this regularly, and pointed it at it and let it run. And it ran for minutes. I don't know exactly. I went and got coffee. But when I got back, I had all of the folder hierarchy was there from my report portal, along with all of the RDLs. Now, I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't have all of these folders, particularly with names that mean nothing. Microsoft Dynamics did that to my report server. I will not take credit for that. This is the folder I use, production. And now I have all the RDLs. And now I can go and bring them into a new project or solution. Consideration here is, do I want a single solution with multiple projects or multiple solutions with single or multiple projects? It really depends on how your team works and, most importantly, how you do check-in, check-out of source control. If you're checking in and out the entire solution, then you may want to reevaluate that depending on the size of your team. If you're a team of 1 or 2, that may not matter at all. So get together with your team, just like you come and you have standards on naming conventions that you all follow, right? Yeah? Tables, stored procedures, You all follow them? I was the noisy wheel there because it was a really bad convention. But I complied. So think about how you want to do bringing them in. Yes, I usually get this question. You couldn't just push them right up to the new server. And unless you're on like 2008, they're going to just work on the new server. But you're going to miss out on a few things that we'll cover here. So look at how you want to do it and how you deploy to test, dev, prod, how you do that, manage that process. Kind of depends on how you're going to architect your solutions and all these new RDLs you have.
Dad, are you going to talk about security on those reports and how you move the security over?
I can, yes. And I do it a little differently, so it'll be interesting. So you got them all. You got them into your source control. Personally, I would like to open them up, and I would like to take some time to update them to a unified look and feel, so that when people go to our new report portal that looks different, particularly if you're coming from an older version to 16 or higher, it's going to be a new look and feel to the portal. It would be really professional to have a nice, new, crisp, lean look to the reports. And I would modify the header so that we had the same universal header. Maybe we now include the logo in our header, and I'll talk about that. But some ideas and methodology would be to standardize, determine a final look and feel, your parameters, a universal footer, and the logo. So we'll dig into some of that. So you've already seen this, and I'm going to review some of this because this is a kind of an old header where the old days of Crystal reports where you used to put all the parameters that the report was run by were in the header. It was a really common old method so that when it was printed, people knew that, oh, it was these locations for these dates. There are other ways to do that. Normally within the data, you can have that. And then this one, the header got a little better. We had some navigation. This one, we ditched the coloring because there's whole conversations, and I had some great ones this week about use of color and white space, and we put in the company logo. This is actually about the worst place you could put a company logo because this is your most valuable real estate, is this top left corner.
Where would you put it?
Personally, I would not put it anywhere, but most customers really want it. We all pretty much know where we work, and we really don't need our company logo. And the reason it's the worst place is you pop up this report on your portal, you're starting to look at it, your phone rings. Something's on fire. This is the end user, not IT, because we always have fires. But operations looking at it, and they got to go address some issue. And the 15 seconds they had to scan the report, cognitively they saw this, and that could have been a KPI. That could have been something about the data, whereas this doesn't tell us anything. Because in that 15 seconds, they didn't have a chance to get very far. One reason I do put it here, I like to put it over on the top right when they really want it. But personally, I encourage people to not use it at all. If you do it, embed it as a logo. Who's embedding their logo with a lookup to the database? All right, let's try this a different way. Who's putting a logo on their report? Hands up. Come on, reach high. It's not that hard. All right, who's doing it embedded? And who's doing it with a lookup to the database? All right, there's one. Marketing will change the logo on you. Or they'll change the color, they'll change it, and you'll have to touch hundreds of reports. If you make it a lookup to the database, you can either go to your shared data set, we'll cover, and change it there, or you can update it in the database. Boom, every report gets it. All right, yeah, here's that old school where we talked about who was in there with the color, and now we start to get modern, right? You've seen Power BI, if you've used it, with the latest this year, Power BI got more of the Office look and feel. You know, Office 365 now has a much simpler ribbon that's less busy. So that's what came in here. Anyways, just ideas. Create a template. Come up with what you're going to use for the report, and create a template and stick with it. I'm watching the time. Include the navigation. Pretty much every report has date parameters, a date window. There's very few to none that don't have some slice of time involved. Embed it. I really like this method. This is a weekly report because you can see week 1. You can walk forward, walk back without having to go pick something from the pick list and hit view report. A better user experience, more interactive for the user. Particularly considering more and more users are using touchscreens. On my laptop, I got a touchscreen, and drop-downs don't work so great on a touchscreen because think about it with the mouse. You click on it, and the minute you move your mouse away, it rolls away. How do you do a drop-down list with a touchscreen? How do you pick it and then slide down and get the value? And more we're doing that, and users are doing that. I sat on a plane the other day and did some stuff in Power BI, and I did it so fast because I was able to do this. It was the opposite problem. I was like, it was great, way faster than on my 35-inch. Yes? Yes, so the question is, can you set defaults? And yes, you can and you should, and I always set defaults so that you cannot do this idea I just talked about with the auto run unless all of the parameters have a default. So I like to default to all stores for yesterday, and then because that's the most common run requirement. And then if they want a single store or single area or region or a different day, then they can pick that and hit run report. But when they go run the report, it will auto run, return to their desktop in under 15 seconds, and then they can change it if that's not what they want. And you have to have all defaults if you want to do subscriptions. So the question was more about the default settings on all the different attributes of the things like font. I always want to use Arial 8 or Arial 12 instead of Tahoma. I do not know of a way to do that. And there's one setting, and I will buy you dinner if you tell me how to globally change the auto grow is true by default, and I hate it. I have to change it every single time. I don't know how you could change those built into Visual Studio. Standardize your parameters. This is an old picture. Those of you that aren't on 16 or higher will recognize this. We were limited to 2 columns. Now we can have as many columns as we want of parameters. There's still some challenges there. I like having my company hierarchy and my date hierarchy separate. Today I would do this a little differently because I cannot be limited to 2. I did some funky stuff because the company hierarchy grew, and I did some really creative stuff with the store filter, and I had to put in these dummy, very hokey placeholders in order to force these into this, which we no longer have to do with 2016 because we get more control over that. They do still have to be in a certain order, or you will get that cascading dependencies error. Microsoft, that's my bone to pick. They didn't finish baking that one. Database stored as a logo, I covered this, right? Stored as a logo, it's really easy. You go and you say, I'm going to query this data set. It's a shared data set, more on that, and bring it up. Oh, look at that, shared data sets. Any other questions or comments about templates? So the question I usually get is, you can go into Visual Studio and define a certain report to come up anytime you hit New Report. But I'll bet you none of you went and ran and created a new report from using New Report. You probably went and took an existing report and did a save as, and then took some stuff out to get it where you want it. What I did is I took one that was portrait, one that was landscape, like you saw here. One landscape, one portrait, has all the parameters and dummy placeholders. How many times have you had 6 or 8 data sets in your report, and the one you wanted was at the bottom? And every time you needed to see the fields in it, you had to scroll down to see all the values. I go edit the XML, and I move that data set to the top. Because the company hierarchy and my data sets for all those dates, I don't use regularly. I don't use them. Once I hook them up to the parameter, I don't use them. But the one that's the main data of the report, I am constantly editing the stored procedure, changing the columns, hitting refresh, going to find my new columns, and when they're off the page, it's a real pain. So I move that and edit that up. So I publish them to the report server so I can go get a copy, and I pull that down. I put it on the file system on my workstation and share it with my coworkers. And what's the other place I should put it? Quiz time. Source control. Check it in source control. And then you just go get it out so you know that the whole team is working with the same template. And then you're going to have a consistent look and feel for it. Okay, shared data sets. Who's using shared data sets? A few. Who's using Power BI? Are you using shared data sets in Power BI? We were so thrilled to get shared data sets and certified data sets in Power BI. They have been in reporting services as long as I can remember, and they are really, really useful. If you have a data set that is the company's net sales, and we have agreed that this is how we calculate net sales. I do a lot of work in retail and restaurant, and we do not include discounts and coupons because we did not receive cash for that. So that is not in net sales. There's a few exceptions, and so we have 2 shared data sets, one that is net sales and one that is net sales plus discounts, because labor cost is calculated on the other net sales. So you publish it as a shared data set, and then all the reports that use that. We've all had the challenge where, hey, this daily report that has a total for the week doesn't match the weekly report. And one of the most common reasons is they were done by 2 different developers who wrote their own stored procedures or used the same view but wrote the T-SQL differently. You can avoid that by using a shared data set at an appropriate granularity. And there's a whole conversation on grain and data modeling we don't have time for, but if you had a shared data set that was sales by day, then you can go write a daily report and you can go write a weekly report and they will match. Yes?
Where are you storing your shared data sets?
When you build it in Visual Studio, you deploy it to the report server. I create, and I think I have a slide on it where I show the folders.
We're storing it in our database, that's why I was asking.
The,
We do it differently.
the reporting services data set,
What they point to.
okay? Yeah. They're also cacheable. So if you have a classic scenario of nightly ETL of transactional data, and we have yesterday's sales, you can cache it to run when you know your ETL process is over, and it'll cache that data, and then every user who goes to run that report gets it like that, and it doesn't make a trip to the database. Yeah, the DBAs in the room are happy. Reduce those resources. Otherwise, every time someone runs the report, query the data from the database. If you're doing last period sales, once the period is closed, those sales aren't changing. You can cache them, and I'll talk some more about that. Logos. Cache that one, even though it's stupid, wicked fast, but all those resources add up if you have thousands of users. Not suitable for cascading parameters. Pick a state, give me the cities. Pick a city, give me the streets. Not good for that. Once you create a shared data set, again, this is an old slide. I've been doing this presentation a long time. This is the old pre-16 look. You can see for this, I have a folder to your question. I have a folder on the report server I put all my data sets in. And then I can go to that folder. I pick the logo. All of these reports are using that logo. So if I'm going to make a change to that data set, I know what I'm going to affect. Here's the new portal. Data sets. Logo, I can see. This is on my workstation. It's just as an example so you can see the new look and feel. So I had a data set for the company hierarchy, and it returned all the districts. 300 plus locations, each district manager had 10, and so on. And I had one of these managers was killer doing QA for me. Great guy. Could never remember which region was his. So I went and changed the stored procedure that generated the data for the shared data set and included their location, space dash space, their name. So now I go, Bob DeWitt. He's 14, isn't he? Yeah, 14. Now, every single report that uses that shared data set gets this new updated, improved user experience. And you didn't have to touch dozens or hundreds of reports. So you can imagine how that would parlay into the users getting data, right? Numbers. Net sales is net sales, because both these people use the same shared data set. In Power BI, we have the concept of promoted and certified data sets, where only an admin can certify it, and this is company gospel on what this data is. You can cache it, so you can say, every day at 0700, cache it. Every day. We know our ETL's done, cache it. Don't do this one. You will just piss off your DBAs. Use a shared schedule. Go create a shared schedule and pick the shared schedule. Otherwise, it just puts another job with a crazy GUID as the name, and if you try and rename it, you will break it. Questions there on shared data sets? I'm going to try and pick up the pace and make sure we cover it all. Really, really good stuff with shared data sets for data consistency and speed and performance. But really for data consistency, for multiple people to use it. In Power BI, we can go start a new report and point it at a shared data set. It doesn't even have to be on our workstation. It just reaches into the cloud and gets it. So you can do the same thing here in reporting services. All right, publishing. I'm used to being out front a little more. Okay, we're good. We talked about using Visual Studio and Configuration Manager. I'm going to touch on this because I think it's a little dangerous, but you can in Visual Studio. Anyone not using Visual Studio using Report Manager? I had someone last time I did this. I was kind of surprised. You can build in Report Manager. It's as capable, but you're limited to one report. So in Visual Studio, you can come up here and change your configuration, and you tell it the path to the server, right? So this is on my local workstation. You can tell it the target version. You can develop in Visual Studio 17 and deploy down to 14 or 12, I think, even. You can also set this to you pick, let the server determine. And you can go back here and change this to production and point this to the production server or the production path on the same server. And when you right-click deploy, right, it publishes it. I don't know what you do in your environment. Maybe you only have rights to publish to dev or test. I work in a lot of really small organizations that don't have dev or test. And I'm doing stuff in production all the time. So if you were to use this method to switch back and forth between test and prod, reconsider that and put some other process and controls in place, because what happens is you deploy it to prod, and then you go work on your next scope of work. And you didn't change your configuration setting back to dev. And if you're like me and you hit F5, 5, 10, 15, 30 times an hour, right? Refresh that query, F5, F5. You hit F5 in Visual Studio, it deploys the whole project to the server. And it's Control-Alt-Delete really, really fast and kill it. And you don't know where you're going because until you look here, when you see the output in the bottom of your window. I wish we had what we have in SSMS where I can color code the tabs so I know which server I'm connecting to. And I'm sometimes connected to different servers, on-prem, cloud, different clients at the same time. So I use that color coding scheme really heavily. We don't have that in Visual Studio here. So if you're using this configuration manager, be careful. That's really it for publishing. I wanted to talk about Report Portal, because again, this session includes a little survey, because a lot of people haven't seen some of the new features. And this is to talk a little bit about branding. Here, you've seen this. We get the new features of Enterprise. Our paginated traditional are here. And we can have all different layouts depending on this. You can custom brand now with 2016. Anyone using custom branding? Is it company colors and logo? I think Microsoft did this just to show how ugly you could make it, because that is truly painful to look at. And I hope your company colors are not the Xbox colors. We one time had a vendor come in to present their solution to us, and they used our company colors, and we were like, oh my God, why would you do that? It was as ugly as this. Similarly, conversely, Allegiant Airlines went the opposite direction, and this is equally difficult to use. Maybe not as painful, but it's very difficult to see, because we're breaking some very basic rules of contrast here with this. So you can do custom branding. I really like a custom presentation. I actually have not used Report Portal in the places I've worked over the years with Report Manager, and I've been using reporting services since '04. At my last full-time role, we used this page. It happens to be a SharePoint page, but it is nothing more than a page of hyperlinks. And I was able to very, very densely, how many reports are here? 30 plus? Include. You wouldn't get 30 plus reports that densely here. And I can change the name without it being the same name as the report. I can put them in what order I want, whereas in Report Portal, you don't have control over the order of the reports. So I was able to group them in these. And they open in a new window, because this happens to be a SharePoint page, and this particular SharePoint web part had an option, open a new window. Do not be confused, this is not SharePoint integrated mode. This is just a page of hyperlinks. This could be a link off to Aetna open enrollment site, or another third-party SaaS vendor, or ADP where you go see what your paycheck stub says. It just happens to be a hyperlink to an SSRS report server, and it renders the reports. My users would regularly pop one, pop another one, and then compare the two. Run 2 different stores or 2 different date ranges. I really like this method. You could filter it with the left nav, which we're all familiar with. You could filter it with the top nav for a much better user experience. I got another hour, right? All right. You saw this. You can embed a report in a page. So I'm talking about publishing now and options here. I don't think I need to beat this up anymore with source control, but as was in this room, as I usually see, most people are not putting their RDLs in and out of source control. When Susie tells you to add it and someone comes in and goes, you ruined it, and you got to roll it back, you got to either remember what you did, and it might have been hours or days of work, but if you had it in source control, even if you're not official source control, do something on your own workstation. Give it a suffix, V1, V2, date V1, date V1A. It saves you a lot of time. Linked reports. So I talked about some of my favorite features with shared data sets and linked reports. Who's using linked reports? All right. They are really powerful. And I'm going to go over a few examples on how to leverage them. And this will talk a little bit about your security. Because security is usually handled at the folder level in a reporting services installation. Avoid trying to do it at the report level. It gets really hard to manage. It's just like the file share. So if you do it at the folder level, you know that all the objects inside this folder are inheriting. And if you start breaking inheritance on files within a folder or RDLs within a folder, it can get really confusing. And I think I have a slide on exactly that. You can reduce your overall report count, permissions, and stuff like that. So let's jump right in. I, again, work in a lot of small environments, and I will have a production folder and a development folder. So I can right-click deploy to dev. I can go to the portal, because it always looks different in the browser. I can go to the user's workstation, which has a much different resolution and monitor than I do, see how it looks. Okay, looks good. Then I can do the move and move it over into prod. So I have a prod and dev folder. I put everything into a masters folder. This may not work for you with security and permissions if you're using Report Portal. So you'll want to do some testing there. But if you're using a front end like I showed you, a SharePoint page or some custom links or a .NET app to serve the reports, then you can do this because you're handling access to that report a different way. I put all of my automated ones, all those auto email subscriptions, I put in a dedicated folder. And self-documenting. So we talked about earlier in the beginning where you can write a query to interrogate the database, and you can find all of the reports and which folders they're in. You can go see the security permissions on the folders and get an idea of the layout you have. So in theory, you could write a document, a report, a SSRS RDL report that documents your environment. So if you created a report, sales territory, it's in my production masters folder. I can come here, manage, and create a linked report. So when you create a linked report, it's a push. You go to the report, and I'm going to create a linked report somewhere else. So I go create it. It goes, OK, what's the name? I'm going to call it Sales Territory Far West. And now I have Sales Territory Far West along with my sales territory. And I did it 2 more times and created 2 more linked reports. It's the same report. So when the business comes to you and says, you know what, add this column, change this calculation, and make the font a little bit bigger, you can go do that, and all of the linked reports will be updated. Yeah, okay, minor. But when you have this done more than 3 or 4 times, that can be huge. You don't have to touch as many reports. But here's where it becomes really sweet. So the C-level executive gets to see all of the regions. In many companies, you only get to see your locations under your purview. You don't get to see the whole company. If I'm a regional manager, I can see mine. But the head honcho gets to see them all. Far West guy only sees Far West. It's the same report, but I have gone in to this report and I have changed the default parameter from all to sales territory, Far West. Now be nice and hide that parameter. Don't be a jerk and give a user a report with a parameter and a choice of 1 item. That's just cold. Hide it from them, and they get to see their area. So you could do that for all of these other people, and then you go in, you go in, you see, you hide it. You make it hidden, you change the default, and then you go to the security tab, and you go in, and it's going to warn you. You're going to break inheritance. Yeah, duh. I'm going to make it so that only these people get to see this report. And I'm going to go in and say that the region Far East group, don't put users here, because when there's turnover or that person switches regions, work with your Active Directory team and put in a group. Save you a lot of time, because then if there's turnover, you really don't care because you're using Active Directory permissions. I'm going to give them browser rights, and then that's all they see. So you do that for the Southeast and the other regions, and now you have one report with 3 linked reports, and when you need to make a change to the report, all of them get the change. And now the permissions are controlled for more security. So that's a little bit of your security question there on how we control that. I have 10 minutes. So I'm going to talk, this is usually a really, really popular topic when I do this, so I'm going to fit it in. I call it the Fishhead Ted footer. That's my nickname. And I put this universal footer on all of my reports. So if you go click, I have the report name, the legalese, right? Proprietary and confidential company information. It was printed on this date at this time by this person. Key information. So that when they come to you at 8:45 in the morning and go, this isn't right. Well, no, the report is correct. The report hasn't changed in months. It's simply missing data. It's not wrong. It's reporting to you all of the data we have, and we have told you repeatedly we don't finish loading all of the data till 10 a.m. I can see you ran this at 8:15. Please come back in 2 hours. Unfortunately, when they export that to Excel, it drops the footer off, which is a favorite export method. But good stuff to put on there. If you are putting page 1 of 1, be careful for long, big reports. It will slow down the rendering of that report. More on that. So when you click on this footer, it's a hidden drill-through report. And I did it for myself and for my manager, and I taught other managers to use it. Because when you click on it, it runs report, which tells me everything I want to know about that report. I went and interrogated the catalog, and I went and got the report name, who wrote it, and when it was, the linked report path is here, the data sources it uses, and the stored procedures it uses. So if someone's complaining about a report being wrong or slow, I don't have to go open Visual Studio or anything. I go run the report, and I go, yeah, that was kind of slow. What stored procedure is it using? I don't remember. I hit this, I go, oh, I copy this. I've already got SSMS open. I paste F5, and I get to see how long the stored procedure is actually taking. Or then I might go crank it open and look at it and see which tables it's using. So really useful information. Here's the shared data sets it's using, and if it has any inline T-SQL in it, it lists all of that T-SQL there. I try and avoid this, but sometimes when it's a really simple little query, I'll include that there. But generally, I try and put everything in a compiled stored procedure. And then the last little piece that's on report is the usage. And this is who's run this report and how many times in the last 90 days. It's simple. You saw that query earlier. I go get from the trend, and I use this to train managers to see if they're people that report to them, right? So area managers or regional managers, are your area managers using the tools in the toolbox that we have created for them to get the job done to run the business? And I actually used this. I had a request for a pair of reports, a summary and a detail, and I just couldn't get to it. And it was an SVP who finally came to me and said, come on, it's been months. So I dropped what I was doing, I banged it out. And I got it to him. And he goes, okay, great, what about the detail one? I go, I'll try and get to it. I didn't. It took me a month or two, and he came to me. And I went and ran this on the first one I had run for him. And I went back and I said, sir, I'm a little reluctant to take the time for our team to create the detail one for you when half of your team has never run the first one that I created for you. It was a little ballsy, but I had to go, look, we did this and you're not using it. I'm not real encouraged to go use resources for another one. And I had it right there. And I taught other managers to use this. Go run it. You don't care about this piece, but you can go see if the people that are reporting to you are using the tools we've built them. to get the job done and make the company money. This is a title block I use. I can pass it all kinds of different values, right, for the selection parameter. If I pass it a 3, it gives me all the shared data sets. If I pass it a 2, it gives me the inline SQL. So it's one big stored procedure that does a whole bunch of different things for me. I did it as a way to keep all of that code in one stored procedure. And it's, again, you saw all this. So it goes and parses that XML in the database and gets and returns all of that information this way. In my day-long class, we spend a whole bunch of time talking about end users and working with users and scope of work. I just keep this here as an idea. We're not going to talk a lot about it, but really, really consider requirements gathering up front can save you a lot of effort on report development and report development time.
What do you use for mockups?
So the first thing I do, the question was, what do you use for mockups? So the first thing I do is I go, am I replacing something that already exists? And a lot of the times it's an Excel document already. If it's not already there as an Excel document, I say, bang it out in Excel on what you want. Nowadays with Power BI, if it's a Power BI report, I'll go into Power BI desktop and I'll drag some visuals onto a page, and they don't do anything. They're not hooked up to data. But I'll sit there and they go, yeah, I want that or that or that. I only do that a little bit because I know the business so well. I usually ask, what is the pain you're having? What is the problem you're trying to solve? I had someone just last week say, I want this report. I go, well, why is it you want that? And it was a conversation about price increase. California, we have a minimum wage increase coming. Everyone has to raise their prices in the restaurant business. It happens every January because minimum wage goes up $1 every January. So they said it was about this. I go, okay, now I know what your pain is. And I know the business, I know the data, so I usually know what to do. But if I need something, I'll say, give it to me in Excel. I know it's late. Some of you have flights. I'm flying home tonight. But think strategically. These 2 pictures have been on my cubicle wall at least a decade. The one on the right is so faded, I don't know if you can see it. It's 2 bridges, decks that meet like this. And the caption says, if you got it almost right, it's still wrong. This was on my cubicle wall behind me, so that when my boss came and said to get something done, and I said, well, you know, we should probably consider masking Social Security numbers. He had to say to me, no, let's just get it done. He had to say it to me with this right behind my head. It didn't help, but I've moved on. And I would move it around, right, so it would catch his eye, right? Like the billboard on your way to work. You don't notice it till it's changed. And consider those go behind you. I have a session I do on commenting your code. So how many times have you opened up some code and gone, what the? And you scrolled back to the top? Oh, I've learned a lot in 5 years. So consider those behind you and come. And please, thank you. Any questions, reach out to me. I don't do Twitter and blog. And every year I say I'm going to do more. And please do the session evaluations. I appreciate it. The conference appreciates it. And have safe journeys.